the full judgment of the 2022 presidential petition. Kenyans have been waiting for it with bated breath. Kenyans have really been waiting for it, so that they're able to peruse it, go through it carefully, hoping that they will understand the ruling of the Supreme Court. And today, September 26th, 2022, it is finally going to be out. Indeed, I believe by the time you take in this video, it'll be out. And you know, there are those who believe that the full judgment will in fact open a can of worms. Because people are looking for answers to certain questions. Kenyans are still puzzled. Even in their pain, they need to understand why. Yeah. And I believe it is the right of every citizen of Kenya to understand the why behind the judgments pronounced by our courts of law. Because of course whatever they do is based on our laws, based on our constitution, which we got in 2010. And we didn't just get it like that. There was a lot of blood which was poured for us to get a new constitution. It's a precious document. It is a document that we placed a lot of hope in, that it would guide the country to greater heights, that it would help the country to avoid injustices that we have suffered in the past as a nation. And therefore that judgment is based on all that. And Kenyans expect to understand why. But now the question is, will this full judgment do that? Will it come anywhere near doing that? That is the question. Yes, we have accepted it. Yes, we respect it. As law-abiding citizens, we must accept it. We must respect it. However, I believe it is also important that we understand it. Because understanding it will build our democracy, will build our country. Because people will be able to retain their confidence, very important, in our judicial system. Because if people don't have confidence in the judicial system, if something happens tomorrow, if they suffer an injustice, they will be hesitant or they'll avoid seeking justice in the judicial system. And that is the worst thing that can happen to any country. The very worst. Because what is the alternative to courts of law giving us justice? There's no alternative. There are no other viable alternatives. We don't have anything else. A very warm welcome to my show today, where I go very deep into what the expectations are. And I also predict what I think is going to happen next. Which should be super fascinating for all of us. If you're already enjoying this video, please remember to give me a like. And if you're yet to subscribe, kindly press the subscribe button so that every time I have a new video, and going forward I'm going to be producing a lot of videos, very informative stuff, so that every time I produce a video, you'll get a notification so that you don't miss anything. And I have a quick question. Have you taken in weekly intelligence briefings number 87? My weekly intelligence briefings number 87, which talks about what went on behind the scenes, shortly before the judgment was pronounced by the Supreme Court. Have you taken it in? I believe you should. And then you'll understand many things that may be a complete mystery to you right now as we speak. Now, in case the reason why you've not taken it in yet is that you're not yet a subscriber, I believe there are details on your screens right now. Take full advantage of this special offer, which is expiring in a few hours. It's an amazing offer because it's only a fraction of our usual fee for my weekly intelligence briefings. This is information that is way too sensitive to appear here on the public channel. So I highly recommend it. Go for it. Right. I would urge you to stay with me until the very end of this video so that you understand why Kenya, the country called Kenya, has entered extremely dangerous waters. And it has to do this judgment. Find out exactly why. Right. Let's get down to it. Twende kazi. Never before in the history of our country has the full judgment of the Supreme Court over a presidential petition been so anxiously awaited. Never ever. In 2013, after Chief Justice William Ruto pronounced the Supreme Court judgment, nobody was interested in the full judgment. Nobody had anything to look for in the full judgment. The evidence was not glaring. The evidence was not clear. In 2017, the Supreme Court voted 4-2 or 4-2 to overturn the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Chief Justice David Maraga, Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu, and Justice Lena Ola, and Justice Smoking Wanjala all voted to overturn the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Nobody was interested in the finer details as celebration, very wild celebrations, broke out countrywide. But in 2022, everything was very, very different. Starting with the judgment read out by Chief Justice Martha Koome. Now, the way this should work out anywhere in the world is that the Supreme Court judges look at the evidence and nothing else, just the evidence. And then based on that evidence, they pronounce themselves. And it should be very easy for anybody, not just legal experts, to look at the full judgment and understand where the Supreme Court was coming from in making the judgment they did. And in many instances, based on the summary read out by Chief Justice Martha Koome, it will not be too difficult for any legal expert to start guessing and imagining why the Supreme Court made the judgment that it did. But in the case of 2022, these legal experts were left with more questions than answers. And that is why today's full judgment, it's being released today, was awaited with bated breath by legal experts and indeed Kenyans. Kenyans who are in pain. And you see, this is the vast majority of Kenyans. How do we know they're in pain? Well, there is plenty of evidence out there. But let's look at just one. Thousands of Kenyans are going to IEBC offices countrywide and demanding that their names be removed from the voters' register. Now, I have never, in all my years of experience as a journalist, heard of something like that happening anywhere in the world. And I'm ready to be corrected and to be given an example. In such and such a country, in this year and that year, people did a similar thing. I'm still waiting. Yeah, and maybe there is a case somewhere. But in our country, Kenya, it is unprecedented. It has never happened before. And that tells you that there are a lot of Kenyans out there who are so pained that they can stop whatever they're doing, their daily chores, their work, their office, their business, and take the time to go to an IEBC office or station and ask for their names to be removed, which of course is a legal headache. It's a problem because the makers of our Constitution did not foresee a situation where citizens would want to be removed rather than added to the voters' register. The puzzles and mysteries that Kenyans were expecting this full judgment to answer, to solve, are many. To start with, a lot of the evidence used, presented to the Supreme Court of Kenya, was from the DCI. The DCI are professional evidence gatherers. Yeah, if I can put it like that. And so Kenyans wanted to know how evidence from the DCI, our top investigative organ, maybe the equivalent of the FBI in America, Kenyans are very eager to know how evidence from such a state organ can be of such a quality that it is not acceptable to the Supreme Court. Of course, there are instances where this can happen, but Kenyans want to know exactly how and why, okay, which a full judgment should be able to explain. So that somebody looks at the full judgment and says, aha, this is why. Yeah, there was a problem here. There was a problem there. This evidence cannot be accepted, etc., etc. ODM leader Raila Odinga, in one of his speeches, said that he is waiting for the full judgment of the Supreme Court. And the tone and manner in which he said this implied that he'd really like to see, because he thinks he will not see, he would really like to see what the reasons were. The reasons why all the evidence ended up being hot air. Yeah. Wild goose chase, etc., etc. Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu was quoted as the Supreme Court judges retired to bring in their verdict. She was quoted as saying that Kenyans should pray for them for discernment, which is okay. In fact, most Kenyans received that comment positively. Our Supreme Court judges fear Almighty God. They're asking for prayers. Surely what can go wrong? When people look up to Almighty God and trust God, what can go wrong? That was the feeling amongst most Kenyans. It was a good sign. Sometimes discernment can be difficult. In fact, most times. But in this instance, the Supreme Court judges live in Kenya. They know what is going on in Kenya. They have relatives in Kenya. They have friends. They're right here in this environment. And therefore, the issue of discernment becomes a lot more easy. And the discernment here is very clear. It is obvious. Go to any corner of the Republic of Kenya and talk to an honest Kenyan, not a supporter of any side of the political divide, just an honest Kenyan, and they will tell you point blank, Azimio and Raila Odinga did not lose this election. No way, they didn't. They'll tell you that for free. And that is why many Kenyans were waiting for this full judgment, so that they can find the explanation, maybe a legal technicality. That happens sometimes, because the law is the law. Maybe a legal technicality, something like that, that would have caused the Supreme Court to pronounce itself in the way it did. Okay? You see, justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to be done. The perception of the public. Because going into this presidential petition of 2022, the public had a lot of faith in the Supreme Court. And that is because of a well-earned reputation of dismissing, overturning a presidential election if there was evidence that there's some fiddling. If there was evidence that the process, just the process, had been interfered with, fiddled with, Kenyans had all the confidence. Thanks to the 2017 judgment of Chief Justice David Maraga. That judgment gave Kenyans the confidence that even if you try to mess around with the presidential election, even if you try to rig it, at least we have a Supreme Court that can stop you dead on your tracks. That perception that Kenyans had has now changed overnight. And this is not a good situation for the country. It means that going forward, Kenyans will not have the same faith they had before the 2022 ruling on our justice system and on the highest level of our justice system. And to be very honest with you, this is terrible news. This is a disaster. Because for our country, it is very important, critical, that people have faith in our justice system. When the people don't have faith in the justice system, we are finished. That's really what it is. It's just a matter of time. Even if it does not appear to be obvious right now. Because tomorrow, somebody is going to suffer an injustice. And then they're going to think to themselves, should I go to court? And then their perception will kick in. And so, what other options will they be left with? What? Tell me. It is a very dangerous situation that the country called Kenya now finds itself in. For the country to be saved, the full judgment must reverse the situation. There must be something in the full judgment that legal experts will look at and say, hey, here's the reason. And pass on this reason to the rest of us Kenyans who don't have legal training. And then we would say, aha, yes, they were justified. That was a fair judgment. Our faith in our Supreme Court and our judicial system is restored because of this. And then those Kenyans will still be emotional. Will be in a position to convince them, hey, tuliza boli. The reason why the Supreme Court pronounced itself the way it did is because of 1, 2, 3. These are legal technicalities. This is what happened. The Supreme Court had good reasons. And these are the good reasons. And therefore you have no reason to lose faith in the highest court in the land. You have no reason. Because of this, what we've presented to you, the good reasons that are there and are very clear. That is the only thing that would have a fighting chance of reversing this terrible situation we find ourselves in. But you see, what really worries me and keeps me awake at night is the UDA attitude, the attitude of UDA sycophants and those supporting the presidency of Dr. William Ruto. I saw a comment this morning where one of these UDA people was saying there's no big deal with people wanting their names removed from the iebc voters roll. There's no problem, because other people will register as voters and keep on voting the way they want to vote. So in the end, those who remove their names will lose. This is what this person is trying to say. What? Now I appreciate the fact that a lot of these sycophants are young people. They have no experience. They don't know. They don't understand. They cannot even begin to understand. And this clearly comes out in a Kenyan of sound mind actually expressing such an opinion and trampling on the emotions and feelings of the vast majority of Kenyans in doing so, and having no apologies about it or any apologies to make, and not caring. What? That is not the way to go. It isn't. It is not. Because I believe as a human, it is important to think ahead. Because what are we saying? What are we telling future generations? What are we saying about the 2027 presidential elections? What are we saying? Indeed, there are those who believe that the William Ruto presidency is about to discover why President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2017 went into a handshake, Rosafi. They're just about to discover why. Because it is very difficult, extremely difficult, to rule without the goodwill of the vast majority of those you want to rule. How are you going to do it? How? Are you going to do it by telling them it is okay? If you want your names removed from the voters register, it is okay? It is a non-issue? In fact, it is use losing? Is that the way to go? I don't think so. At the time I put together this video, the full judgment was yet to be released. But it is fairly easy to predict the outcome. Because in a young democracy like ours, it is extremely important for people to understand that we must all respect the ruling of the court. Because we don't have any other option but to respect it and accept it. However, in a democracy, people are allowed to go through that judgment with a fine-tooth comb, and express their opinion from a legal standpoint and from the standpoint of our Constitution, which was deliberately crafted in simple non-legal language so that as many Kenyans as possible can grasp and understand it. Because in the full judgment, you cannot dismiss something by simply saying it's hot air or a wild goose chase. You have to explain the reason why you're dismissing it, because of 1, 2, 3, because of this and that evidence, etc., etc. And it has to be convincing. And therefore it is easy to predict that the full judgment is going to end up being very controversial, because of the issues which are going to be brought out of it. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.